Two issues will get a coach fired quicker than anything else: losing and problems with the NCAA. Jeremy Pruitt is doing both. He is failing at both, and therefore he's out at the University of Tennessee, and the search for the right man in Knoxville continues. They've not had the right guy for 13 years. They may have had the right guy in Lane Kiffin, but he left for USC, and he was not mature enough at that point in his career to get the job done. But we are focusing on Jeremy Pruitt. And if you watch us on a regular basis here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, you know what we do every time a coach is fired. In particular, coaches' firings are huge in college football. Of course, the coach, unlike the NFL, the coach is it in college football. The coach is the star. The coach owns the state. The coach is the most important man in the state, relatively speaking, to the power and the authority and the importance that we've given him as college football fans. Go to any state in the union, go to any state specifically in the South and the Midwest, and the coach is the most powerful guy in the state. He's the highest paid public employee, the head football coach of the primary football school in the state. Therefore, it's important. We have made it that important. And so Jeremy Pruitt cannot win at Tennessee, and he's out. Situations change so quickly in sports, and in particular in college football, more so than any other sport because of the lack of games played, the limited number of games played in college football. It's the, get this, look at the NFL, look at baseball, look at basketball, look at hockey, look at it at various levels. There are less games played in college football than any other major sport. Therefore, the importance of every game is ramped up. Therefore, changes happen quickly. Perceptions change. Situations change quickly. 1 year ago at this point, Jeremy Pruitt was coming off a 6-game winning streak. His team was 8-5 with a bowl victory over Indiana in the Gator Bowl, the Tax Slayer Bowl. He was forming another fine recruiting class. His recruiting classes have been exceptional. That's one of the main reasons, probably the main reason he got the job in Knoxville, was because of his recruiting prowess. So, a second consecutive top-notch recruiting class, top 10 in the nation, bolstered by a 6-game winning streak, a bowl win, and Jeremy Pruitt was given a contract extension through 2025. Why? These contract extensions are handed out to these coaches way too quickly. You win a couple consecutive games and you have a decent 7-5 season, and most institutions can't wait to get another contract in your hands. I guess to just prove to recruits that you're going to be there long term. They just signed the man a couple years ago to his original contract. They didn't need to show full confidence in him just because he went 7-5 and won a bowl game. And that happened because they played the weaker part of their schedule at the end of the season. That's why they won so many consecutive games. Not that they improved that much. They didn't improve that much. They lost to BYU and Georgia State earlier in the season. They played their toughest part of the schedule early in the season in 2019. They were bolstered by a weak schedule in the second half of the season. That's why Tennessee won 6 consecutive games. Yes, they were playing better football at that point, and I was all for Jeremy Pruitt at that point and applauding his relative success at that point, not just based on the wins on the field, but the recruiting rankings that were showing us that he was doing a nice job in that portion of it. But he goes into this season, the season falls apart. He cannot find a quarterback. He cannot develop a quarterback. Whatever the issue is there, Chris Weinke not getting the job done as the quarterback's coach. You would think a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback who spent many years in the NFL, who didn't have dynamic talent, but was able to develop his own quarterback skills, would be the right man to develop your quarterbacks, but he's not been able to do that. Chris Weinke has done a poor job by all accounts at Tennessee. And now Jeremy Pruitt not getting the job done, fired after what is his third season in Knoxville at 3-7. So they won their first 2 games. They had a lead on Georgia by 4 points at halftime, and ever since then, it's been all downhill. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Navy Thomas 8, buddy.
Navy Thomas. After another coach is fired.
Isn't this the third coach since Phillip Fulmer?
5.
How many years ago?
5 coaches. This is going to be their 6th. The next guy they hire is going to be 6 coaches since Fulmer.
Man, I can't even follow them that quick anymore. When they got rid of Fulmer, I thought, man, they should have hired him back again, but they never did. So when I saw that, I fired it off to you. And all right, I'm listening to you, so we'll talk to you later.
Appreciate that, Tom. Have a good one. Our man, Navy Thomas, is always here, always ready to deliver information for us. So if I miss it, Navy Thomas will get it to me. I want to run through the ESPN story or whatever credible source to run through what Jeremy Pruitt was facing there at Tennessee, why he was fired. And again, I started the show by saying there are 2 issues that will get a coach fired quicker than any. Number 1, losing. Number 2, NCAA violations. Jeremy Pruitt filling both boxes. Let's get to your comments and questions on the live chat. Then I'm going to go to the ESPN article or whatever credible article I can pull up and give you my thoughts as we read through the article on Jeremy Pruitt's firing. But if you've been watching us for an extended period of time here at the Voice of College Football, that when a coach gets let go, Mark Richt, Mark D'Antonio, Willie Taggart, Will Muschamp, who else? There are others. We get on here immediately. Tom Herman. This is what happens in college football that means so much. All right. Hang on just a second. I will be with you in 2 seconds. Hey, what's up? Yeah. Do you realize how important you are? Do you realize this? I'm live right now. I'm live right now, and I took your phone call. No. Tell me what you need to tell me. I thought we were getting our first call of the day on Jeremy Pruitt here. All right, so Mark D'Antonio gets fired. Mark Richt gets fired or loses the job, leaves the job. On down the line, Willie Taggart, Tom Herman, and others, and we want to be the best at not necessarily the breaking news. We're not going to be the best at that. Other sources have people out there on the streets with their nose to the ground and their ear to the ground to get the stories. We're going to be the first ones to provide the analysis, and that is aided by you in these kind of phone calls. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
The call will start at the beep.
Yeah, who's on the line?
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. How are you, sir?
I'm good. What's up, David?
I just had some real quick thoughts on this. First of all, I'm not entirely surprised. Second, quick question for you. You know, because certainly Tennessee is a different program than, let's say, it was in the 90s, probably even early 2000s. Where would you rank this job right now if you had to rank it?
Wow, that's a great question, because I think you have to combine the historic with the current day, and then you have to look at the potential of the job. So from a football playing state, from that standpoint, it's a decent high school football playing state. From my sources, it's improved. Based on the sources that talk to me about Tennessee football, that it's improved at the high school ranks in recent years, but it's still not at the top of the line. They have a great tradition, and they, of course, play in the SEC, and the fan base is rabid. They have one of the largest stadiums in the country. I think it's a top 15 job.
Top 15, really?
Yeah.
I think it's maybe top 20. I'd be willing willing to go that far, maybe top 25.
Okay.
And here's the thing. First of all, you're right. The stage isn't bad. The region is really good, which I think helps them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they've gotten a fair amount of players from outside the state, so they've gone within that SEC footprint to get talent. Certainly, you can recruit there. Butch Jones, Mark, I don't know if you went back and looked at his recruiting classes, but they always seem to rank, within the top 5 to 10 nationally, if I'm not mistaken. Does that sound about right?
Butch Jones?
Yeah, when Jones was there.
Yeah, he had a number 5 class. I don't know that he was consistently. I know that he was not consistently in the top 5 to 10, but he was in that 5 to 15 range. Yeah, he peaked out at a 5 recruiting class one year, and the others were 8, 12, 15. Yes, he recruited well.
Okay. I mean, that's kind of where I was going with my point is, I think that the talent, obviously you can get the talent there. To that point, though, I think that, obviously it comes down to you not only need to be able to get the talent there, you need to be able to develop the talent. Obviously we've talked about that, numerous times in the past. That being said, I'm going to be really interested to see where they go with this next hire, because I think the further and further you get from success, and, obviously, you take a look at these programs from the 90s. You look at, where Tennessee was at. They were one of the best programs in the 90s. Actually, they were probably one of the top 5 or 6 programs in the 90s. Wouldn't you say, Mark?
Yes, I would.
And then, obviously you look at where Nebraska's at nowadays. You look at where, Michigan's at nowadays. I mean, there's been a drop-off with these programs. Now, obviously, Nebraska's been the most significant drop-off since the 90s, which is obviously their heyday. But I just think the further and further you get from success, the tougher and tougher it is to climb that mountain. And I would also add the aspect that, remember, it was just pretty much them in Florida in the 90s in the SEC. They kind of went back and forth, I think, from about like 1993 to about 1998, where it was just those 2 teams that won the SEC title, if I'm not mistaken. So,
for the most part, yeah. Yep.
I think that that would be the one thing that I would say with this team is I think that the further and further you get from a higher from your success, the tougher and tougher it is. And then you look at the situation in the SEC. On their side, Georgia's a much better program than they were at that particular period of time. They're just continuing to get better and better. Now, I know they haven't kicked down the door and obviously won the ultimate prize, and they've won one SEC title and got to the one championship game. But I just think also when you look, those 2 things I think strike me as going to be the toughest going forward. A, obviously the SEC is even stronger than it was at that time frame, and B, the further and further you get from success, the tougher and tougher it is to get back to that level. Just your thoughts maybe on both of those things.
Well, I think it's a great point that you make about getting further and further away from success, and Nebraska being the prime example of that. The one distinction I would make about Tennessee is that they are closer to the talent than Nebraska. So Nebraska's in some ways the most difficult position of any program in the country because they have the expectations of being what they've been in the past. They also continue to get the support. So they're packing stadiums out. They're building great facilities. They still have a tremendous, for a team that hasn't gone to a bowl game, which we know what that standard is to get to a bowl game. You don't have to be much of anything just to get to postseason play. That Nebraska has fallen that far that they can't even get to postseason play, but they still pack the stadiums. They still have tremendous facilities. They still just have a fan base that is so interested in their football product, but they have to go thousands of miles to get talent, like a bulk of talent. Of course, they're going to get good players out of Iowa, Minnesota, and even at home, but to get really game-changing players for the most part, they've got to go elsewhere. Tennessee doesn't have to do that. So that would be the only distinction on the surface I would make between those 2. But I think it's a great point that you make, that because to these players that are coming up, Tennessee doesn't mean anything.
Right. That's the tough part, Mark, is that, but Dave makes the point, the further and further away you get from success, the less and less you have to sell to recruits, right?
Yeah, they have to figure at some point, well, this is not getting done, and it continues to not get done. So why should I think that we're going to be the team or you're the coach? They've tried 5 other guys. None of them got it done either. But at the same time, they continue to haul in some good recruiting classes.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do, Mark, with their footprint. You know what I mean? I think it helps to be in that footprint because I think that, and by the way, you look at the teams that they're up against in that footprint. You know, obviously, what did you say? Of the top 10 recruiting classes every year, what are 6 or 7 of them are usually SEC teams. So,
Yes.
you know, obviously, you're going to get, just from the footprint, you're going to be able to get a fair amount of talent. So, yeah, I think that, you know, again, it comes back to not only having the right coach, it comes back to having the right coach that can build a staff that can develop talent. And it's very, very tough to find those. And it becomes tougher and tougher, again, once you get further and further away from success. So, yeah, I think it's an uphill climb. And, you know, right now they're on the side of the division. At least they don't have to face Alabama. But, again, Georgia and Florida are tough enough. Although, you know, I think Florida might be easier for them to maybe attain the second spot in that division, but they're really far away from catching Georgia. I mean, wouldn't you say light years?
Well, things can change quickly, but it certainly appears to be light years. They're chasing down one of the 3 or 4 best programs in the country, and they're in the 50 range.
Mm-hmm.
They're a long ways away. Yes, they are.
Right.
You know,
well, it'll be.
I was almost going to make a comparison to what we talk about in the Big Ten and teams chasing Ohio State. And if you would take a Tennessee-like program in the Big Ten, who would that be? Minnesota, and then try to determine how many of those players that they play on their 2 deep roster would play significant time at Ohio State. It's minuscule, and I think it's the same thing with Tennessee right now. They're probably a little bit closer because the recruiting classes are talented to Georgia from a recruiting standpoint, but they are a considerable ways away. Yes.
Yeah, the other thing that would help them is, remember in the 90s, they also caught a period of time where they had a couple of really, well, obviously they had one of the greatest college quarterbacks of all time, but, you know, they had, you know, those teams in that 90s period of time had, you know, Schuler and Peyton Manning. So they had really, really good college quarterbacks. Obviously, Schuler never did anything in the NFL. But, you know what I mean, at the very least, they had 2 really, really good college quarterbacks. So that would be the other way that you can turn around a program, too, is if you can get that generational talent at quarterback and then parlay that into a successful season. Because all you need is that first successful season or 2, Mark, and then you build upon that. So,
and it brings me to a point about what might be needing to be changed about recruiting rankings. The quarterback position should be probably given some kind of weighted value. Because look at Tennessee,
sure.
You know, we're talking about recruiting classes that are in the top 15 in the nation and as high as number 5. But did they recruit a quarterback? Yeah, I'm sure that I know that they recruited quarterbacks. We could name them under Butch Jones and now Jeremy Pruitt that were fairly highly ranked. But I don't think they never got guys at the Fields or Lawrence level as recruits. You know, they would get the 10th best quarterback in the country or the 15th best quarterback in the country, but not that elite quarterback that can change things. And you bring up a great point. Heath Schuler, for as bad as he was in the NFL, was still a top 5 or 6 pick in the NFL draft. He was that good at Tennessee. Right. And of course, Peyton Manning's one of the greatest quarterbacks at both levels in the history of the game. And Tennessee's had awful quarterback play, not for 3 or 4 years, for 15 years. They haven't had a good quarterback except for Josh Dobbs. Joshua Dobbs was a good player. He wasn't tremendous, but he was a top 15 to 25 quarterback in the nation. He was a good player, a very mobile, athletic guy that, of course, has not panned out in the NFL either. So they have not had a quarterback. Their quarterback play has been very substandard.
Yeah, I think that's why, and that's why the interesting thing with hiring Pruitt, Mark, that I'll make this last point here, is that Pruitt was a defensive mind. I still think in today's day and age of college football, to that point, I think it makes more and more sense to look for an offensive-minded head coach, somebody that's a good play caller, schemer, that can you know, work with the quarterback, that he has a history of developing quarterbacks. Say what you will. I mean, Ole Miss going after a Mike Leach. I'm sorry, Ole Miss going after Lane Kiffin. Mississippi State going after Mike Leach. Getting that innovative offensive mind in there at the very least, and maybe you can draw in not only the quarterback but the skill players to kind of build up the offense. And obviously we know which way football's trending nowadays. It's an offensive game, so. It will be interesting to see if they try to go that direction and get an offensive-minded type coach.
I think that's what everyone's trying to do. You get the offensive-minded head coach because that has been, when Nick Saban says offense wins championships now, the game has changed. I think that statement resonated across the landscape if it wasn't known before that. So you get the offensive head coach, and then, of course, he goes and gets the very strong defensive coordinator to run that side of the ball.
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, say what you will about Texas, but I mean, that's what they're trying to put their eggs in that basket again with hiring a Sarkisian. So
yep.
It'll be interesting to see too if they go after another one of these SEC kind of guys too, and stay within their conference and go after one of those coaches. So.
And I know that question's going to be asked of me, and I'm not ready and prepared to answer it, but people are going to be asking for replacements, and I've not delved that deep yet, but we'll get there.
All right, good stuff, Mark. You take care now.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Our man, David Greenshield, Ohio State fan, but always very knowledgeable about looking at the landscape of college football. And yes, Tennessee and Florida owned the SEC in the 90s. Auburn had a couple spurts there. Alabama won the conference in 1996. So what David stated is accurate in general, that between 1993 and actually 2000, that Tennessee and Florida won all the SEC championships, except that Alabama did defeat Florida in the championship game in 96. But Tennessee, Florida, they had it locked down. That became the first initial CBS must-have primetime game. When CBS first took over the SEC, and they would only go with one primetime game per year, every year it was Tennessee and Florida in the 90s. Tennessee had its last shot at a national championship in 2001. They were in line to play for the national championship, and it would have proved to be a much better game had Nebraska had Miami had to play Tennessee for the national championship. Not that Miami team wasn't an all-time great team that would have just bludgeoned just about everyone, but with Tennessee talent on the field, they would have at least provided resistance. But Tennessee lost to Nick Saban and LSU in the 2001 SEC championship game, and that derailed Tennessee en route to a national championship game appearance. 2003, off the top of my head, was that not another LSU Tennessee? No, that was an LSU. That was LSU Georgia, I believe. Anyway, Tennessee almost in the BCS championship game a second time in 2001. Fulmer was there through 2007. His last few teams were not extremely competitive nationally. They were still good teams, top 15 to 25 teams, 8-4 kind of teams. His last few seasons there, 2008 began the, if I've got them in order, did it go Lane Kiffin, Derek Dooley, Butch Jones, of course, then Jeremy Pruitt. And Butch Jones would have had the most success out of those four coaches. I believe I stated earlier in the show that there were 5 coaches. I did not go through the coaches in my mind, but I read somewhere online that it was 5 coaches since Fulmer, but I believe it's 4. Maybe they counted somebody who coached interim in a bowl game or something like that. But Dooley was a disaster. Where is he now? He went to the Dallas Cowboys. He went to the Big 12. He's been all over the place. Derek Dooley was a disaster. Butch Jones, Lane Kiffin was the guy that could have been kind of thing. When you see what he's become now at Ole Miss, even at USC, though it ended poorly for Lane Kiffin, he did a good job at USC for the most part. They had a 10-2 top 10 team one year. But Butch Jones was the guy that was close. He was close. Butch Jones had 3 bowl wins. The first one over Iowa. They blasted Iowa, and they completed a 7-6 season. That was, for Tennessee at the time, a big accomplishment, coming off just bad 4 and 5 win seasons under Dooley. Butch Jones, 7-6, blasted Tennessee in the Gator Bowl, or Iowa in the Gator Bowl. Then they won their next 2 bowl games against Iowa, or against Northwestern, and I'm forgetting for a second. It'll come back to me. But back-to-back 9-4 seasons. And if you check out Tennessee's second 9-4 season, they played Alabama tough. They should have beat Alabama. They had a lead with 4 minutes left against Alabama in Tuscaloosa. They took Arkansas to the wire, and they lost to, was it Georgia or Florida? It would have been Florida, because they never beat Florida. They lost to Florida like 11 consecutive years. The other loss was to Florida. So this would have been in 2015 or 16. Tennessee was really good. They lost the 4 games, but man, they lost to Oklahoma, a playoff team, in which they led by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and lost in overtime to Baker Mayfield and company. They were really good. Again, they had Alabama down like 14-10 in the fourth quarter, an Alabama team that went on and played in the national championship game. Tennessee under Butch Jones. So he had them right there. And then the next season, his final season, they fell off the rails. Similar to what happened at Pruitt this year. And they did not give Butch Jones another opportunity. I don't know. I'm not thinking now that Butch Jones would have been the savior and that Tennessee all would be good and well with Tennessee and they'd be winning SEC Eastern Division championships right now. But I don't know that they really gave Butch Jones a fair shake, considering all that he had done leading up to that, 2017 season would have been his last, correct? I might be off by a year. No, Pruitt 18, 19, and 20. But this season for Pruitt, they owe the man, unless, and this may not be difficult to prove, if Jeremy Pruitt, and I'll go through the wording here in a second. I was just reading an article. If Jeremy Pruitt was, if there was a reason, cause for firing, which I believe based on NCAA violations that are coming down, there will be, that they won't owe Jeremy Pruitt $12 million. But my goodness, these schools, and it happens time and time again, they have a little slice of success for like 4 or 5 games, and they're given contract extensions when they've already got the coach wrapped up for years and years and years, and all they're doing is obligating themselves to more of a buyout at the end. Why does this happen? Was Gus Malzahn really in a position to go get a better job than Auburn? It's one of the top 10 to 15 jobs in the nation. And Gus Malzahn wasn't lighting the world on fire. Why did they have to hand him a contract extension of that magnitude? Sure, you've got to extend the contract to show the faith in the coach, to get the recruiting in line. But to where they owe Gus Malzahn $21 million? So it looks like Tennessee's off the hook. Appreciate your contributions here in the live chat. Keep in mind that the Voice of College Football, we do this based on your individual contributions. And if you've got a contact to a sponsor, that's the remedy right there. That's the baby right there. We are building revenue streams all over the place, or we're attempting to. We will be. And one of the main ones will come through sponsorship. So if you have a contact to a business or you own one yourself, please let us know. Contact me at MarkRogersTV@gmail.com, because the way we will be able to continue to produce the content that we do is through your contributions and also those from the sponsors. All right, let's get to this article, and then I'll get back to the live comments. And of course, you can always call, but I want to go through this and see the main points. Okay, this is coming from Mark Schlabach and Chris Lowe at ESPN. Tennessee's fired Jeremy Pruitt. I will edit this article as we go because we don't need to read all of this. Weeks-long investigation into potential recruiting violations. So again, this is how you lose your job. Losing recruiting violations or violations of any kind against the NCAA. Or in the Hugh Freeze portion of it, it wasn't the losing, it was the NCAA violations plus incendiary type of activities in his personal life that do not reflect well on the program. Okay. The university has concluded that the conduct by at least 2 assistant coaches and several recruiting staff members are likely to lead to an NCAA finding of level 1 and or level 2 violations of one or more governing athletic rules. The university also has concluded that these likely findings were the result of either your material neglect or lack of reasonable preventative compliance measures. So you've lost control of the program. You don't know what your coaches are up to, or you purposed them, you instructed them to carry out those type of activities. A copy of the letter was obtained by ESPN. It states that Pruitt is being suspended with pay, and the university intends to terminate his contract on Tuesday. The letter stated that UT concluded that the NCAA will likely find that you fail to promote an atmosphere of compliance within the football program and or monitor the activities of the coaches and staff members who report directly or indirectly. And again, let's keep in mind that all of this is serious. But if Jeremy Pruitt was 11-1 and 10-2 the last 2 years, that they would stick it out with him. They would stay with him during this process. We've seen that before. Ole Miss gave Hugh Freeze every opportunity. The dirt continued to be piled on his grave, and Ole Miss stayed with him as far as they possibly could because he was winning. Your failure to promote and maintain an atmosphere of compliance and to monitor the activities of the coaches and staff members that report directly or indirectly to you has led to the current NCAA investigation and is bringing and will likely continue to bring the university into considerable public disrepute, embarrassment, contempt, scandal, and or ridicule. That's some harsh, strong language. According to the intent to terminate letter signed by the Chancellor, Donde Plowman, and Athletic Director Phillip Fulmer, who is likely to resign as well. Now, whether he's just finding a good time to resign and doesn't want to be involved in trying to find another coach, although I would think that he would help in that process, or maybe he's part of this issue and he's being let go as well. And the resignation is just saving face. That could be it. All right. The school also said in a statement that in addition to Pruitt, it also issued termination letters to assistant coaches Brian Niedermeyer and Shelton Felton, 4 members of the on-campus football recruiting staff. Plowman said in a statement, what is so disturbing, so demonstrated by the scope of these actions is the number of violations and people involved and their efforts to conceal their activities from our compliance staff and from the athletics department's leaders. Fulmer, Hall of Fame coach, plans to retire after leading the athletic director for the athletic department for more than 3 years. So Fulmer took over the athletic director's job, and it seemed to be a stopgap measure. That was the issue that they had in the last hiring process, that they had egg all over their face because they were chasing coaches all over the country and nobody wanted to coach Tennessee. Then they had the Greg Schiano fiasco, and Fulmer stepped in as being the guy. He won a national championship there. He's the only living legacy to national prominence. He is the man. He's the face, and he brings stability and credibility. So it was known at the time that Fulmer was just going to step in a temporary status to stabilize the situation. So again, I don't know if he's involved, would not want to indict the man that he's involved in these issues. Probably not. It doesn't sound like it, but maybe finding a good time to say, hey, I wanted to get us through rocky waters, and in the short term, this isn't what I had in mind. I wouldn't have, I went through the last debacle and helped the university and the football program get through that, but I'm not sticking around for this one too. See, the Volunteers turned to Fulmer after removing John Curry from the AD role in December of 17. Fulmer coached the Volunteers, blah, blah, blah. We know to national championships, etc., or won national title 92 to 08. We know his successes, blah, blah, blah. Pruitt's exit comes on the heels of Tennessee launching an in-house investigation dating back to November into alleged recruiting improprieties that sources told ESPN centered in part on extra benefits provided to football recruits on unofficial visits. Okay, the one player that was cited in all of this is Amarius Mims, the number 3 offensive tackle, number 19 overall player in the 2021 ESPN 300 rankings. He eventually signed at Georgia. But these improprieties that were found were basically centered around the recruitment of Mims. Vols went 3-7. They lost 7 consecutive games, unless you want to count the win against Vanderbilt. I guess we have to, huh? So there it is. Kevin Steele, defensive assistant, former Baylor head coach, former Auburn defensive coordinator. Kevin Steele will be the interim head coach. So Tennessee's got a lot of work to do. They got to hire an AD. Then that individual's got to turn around and do a national search for a head coach. Or they're saying this in this ESPN article that Kevin Steele will be under consideration for the head coaching position. No knock on Kevin Steele, but unless they really, truly believe that he's the guy, he's not the guy. Or he would have been a head coach at a prominent place. And I know he was at Baylor. He didn't get anything done there. They need to get somebody in there that really, really, somebody who's going to have instant credibility. I don't know who that is off the top of my head. Matt Campbell comes to mind every time I think head coaching position somewhere that's better than Iowa State. But I think, like Brian Harsin, who eventually took the Auburn job, that Matt Campbell can be choosy, even to the point of refusing Tennessee if he thinks, you know what, that's too much of a mess. I'm too much of in a hole to take that job. No, thank you. That might be the case, that even Matt Campbell, even a head coach at Iowa State, would not jump up to Tennessee. And yes, for those of you who've only been watching college football for a few years who actually think that Iowa State's a better job than Tennessee, it's not. But under these circumstances, Matt Campbell can pretty much punch his ticket to any vacancy in the country. Maybe Joey Chadwell at Jamie Chadwell. My apologies. Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina comes to mind. Somebody mentioned in the chat, Hugh Freeze. His name's always going to come up for any head coaching vacancy, especially in the SEC. Hound Dog. This coming from a Tennessee fan, that the job sucks. Hey, Cheryl. Much conversation in the chat about NFL head coaching salaries compared to college coaches. If you take the very top of the line in the college industry, you can imagine it falls off considerably from the 7 and 8 million that Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban make, and Urban Meyer did make, and Jim Harbaugh made until a couple weeks ago, into that 4 and 5. Ton of guys in the 4 and 5 million range that coach at big schools. And I might be off by $500,000 if you want to go up to Ed Ogeron at LSU. and places like that. But between the $3.5 to $5.5 million range, that's where the big time coaches generally fall. Lincoln Riley, Kirby Smart, maybe he makes a little bit more than that at this point now that he's accomplished as much as he has. I'm sure he received a contract extension here in the last couple of years. I would think Kirby Smart, SEC championship games, national championship game. He's gotten an extension that's probably elevated him considerably. The phone line's open at 860-325-3687. So we went through the article. I pretty much gave you my cut on Jeremy Pruitt. He was given a contract extension way prematurely. I don't get it. But Tennessee, if there's one silver lining in all this, they can prove that he was fired due to just cause. Therefore, they should not be on the hook for the buyout. Well, I don't necessarily know about that, Cheryl. I will say this is an interesting video that I'm going to cut here soon. So our friends over at SG1 Sports posted a video the other day that I thought was pretty clever. And we're good buddies, Chris over there at SG1 Sports. What he basically did was he compared his college football playoff predictions and national championship predictions to Herb Street and Cladd and Corso and Howard and Leinart. And so I thought, that's what I need to do. Well, I just did it. They're not favorable. They're more than favorable. Like, I beat all those guys in every category predicting the playoffs and the national championship game and the national champion for the last 5 years. All right, let's get to the calls. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Good afternoon, Mark. This is Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
And I just wanted to check as far as two topics. One was in reference to the Tennessee job. And as far as candidates concerned, one that was off the radar, and they defined him as being VFL, as an NFL player with volunteer connections. And the guy is, I should say, assistant for Belichick, Gerard Mayo.
Okay. Yep.
And mixed emotion about it, because, and I just have to be honest with you, the reason why I'm mixed emotion about it is when it comes to certain institutions, Mark, say, for instance, University of Miami, and as well, I guess now you can say Tennessee, schools that have a tradition. But the thing is, when they want to bring in certain coaches, it's a matter that is when it's pretty much belly up. And that's the reason why I wouldn't want this to be Mayo's first opportunity as far as coaching, because I wouldn't want it to be put a dog on bad taste in his mouth and put a stink as far as on his coaching resume.
So this is a bit of a mess. This situation is a bit of a mess. And we know that there are even further internal problems because we just went through this situation 3 years ago with a coaching search that they completely botched. Now, they did get rid of the athletic director that was in charge of that botched that coaching search. But for Fulmer to be brought into the situation to try to clean things up and stay on for these 3 years to temporarily stabilize the situation just shows you that there's a lot of they need a coach who's been around the block, who just understands what's going on and is not going to be fazed by the mess that has to be cleaned up. And so, I think that they need an experienced head coach.
Would it be time, Mark, to say get away from your heart-bleeding orange and white and getting someone that's totally removed as far as from, quote, volunteer tradition?
Oh, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. as long as he understands what he's getting into and understands, okay, I've got to sell myself to a fan base that is hurting, that has a bit of a chip on their shoulders because they haven't won in so long, but they're proud people. So I've got to connect with them. So he's got to have the ability to connect and respect their traditions and just dive headfirst into orange. But at the same time, yeah, I don't think that should be a prerequisite at all. It's just a bonus. But that wouldn't faze me if I was looking for a guy.
Then also I saw something in the chat in regards to coaching, as far as coaching NFL versus college. And to be honest with you, Mark, I'll take a SEC job over, I would say, at least half of the NFL jobs. And the reason why is this. If you put me at an Alabama, Florida, LSU, Georgia, which I know you're probably saying, okay, Kevin, those are the premier programs, East and West, as far as the SEC. But I would take those 4 schools over half of the NFL because of one reason, that is, I can guarantee myself every 4 years having 8 number one draft choices by just simply recruiting. And the one thing that you can't do that as far as with 75, a quarter of the NFL is that, hey, I can only get only one on a lottery year, 2 number one draft choices each year.
Okay. So the point you're making is that you don't have more talent on a college football team than an NFL team. I don't think we're going to debate that. But you have more talent compared to your competition.
Yes, because I mean, when it's okay, Mark, you're coaching at Mark University. I'm coaching at Kevin University.
Yep.
If I take that back, you're coaching in a Mark NFL team. I'm coaching at Kevin NCAA team. Okay, I have 25 to 26 potential first-round picks a year, which we know of those 26, maybe 6 to 8 are going to truly hit. So you go that 6 to 8 over 4 years, that's on an average of, say, 20 to 32 kids that's going to hit. And when we have 20 to 32 kids over, yes, I know an NFL roster is, X amount of players, but the thing is that I would feel, honestly, more security and more invested as far as in a college program than I would as far as that 25% of NFL programs. Because I think, on my part, I would have more control than I would as far as an NFL.
Oh, you have a lot more control. You can go get your players. You can go get your players wherever. You don't fit within a system. You don't have to draft them. Yes, you can go get the best players. In the NFL, you have to share the best players. You have to share with everybody else. Alabama could go sign the best 22 players in high school football. They could go get the 22 top players, and that's not against the rules. But yes, in the NFL, you have to share the best players with everybody else.
And, just briefly going back as far as the Tennessee situation, or we want to call it a debacle, is it would appear that they say that Peyton Manning's going to have as far as hands-on, feet on, as far as this hiring is concerned. So I would think that probably the front runner, is one that you had named earlier, as far as the gentleman from Coastal Carolina, which I think his heart, bleeds orange and white. So I mean, it wouldn't be a difficult sell, as far as these investigations notwithstanding. But as far as a couple of guys that one guy I'm a little shaky about. I know he was on their list a few years ago, and that was Jason Witten. But then the other guy that I'm just surprised that he hasn't received any. Well, I hope he gets a little bit of play this time around, Mark, and that is former quarterback, as well as I think he's a OC or quarterbacks coach at the institution now, and that's T. Martin. Because the biggest thing in previous years was the experience. But I mean, he has experience as far as USC as well as Tennessee now. So experience shouldn't be as far as that reason why an excuse to not give him an opportunity. But I'm not going to talk about it as far as the pink elephant in the room, but the thing is, no, I don't want it to be a matter of just simply being, I'm going to hire T. Martin when we're belly up. Give me as far as, let me start at the starting line or give me a 5 to 10 yard head start instead of me starting, 10 yards behind the starting line.
Well, I don't think those guys would shy away from the job. There would just be an understanding. Hey, this is a mess. We play in a tough division and a tough conference, and this is a mess. And I've got to go find a quarterback in particular and develop him, or several. And I've got to build up a culture, and I've got to weed out the guys that don't buy in. I got to do all of that. So I can't go 4-8 and 5-7 and get fired. Like, I need 3 or 4 years. There would just have to be an understanding.
Indeed. And that's going to be the thing. I mean, will the University of Tennessee, after, say, year 2, going into year 3, will they be accepting, will they be satisfied, for lack of a better way to say it, for that third year, that fourth year being, say, 7-5, 8-4? Because until some changes occur as far as in that West, it's going to be a while before a Tennessee. So you're going to have to sit on your hands for 5 years, and so you're going to have to be satisfied with an 8-4 and 7-5 once you get out of the wilderness. But that's the thing about that particular fan base is, sometimes we can have caviar taste, but we have to be mindful that if our pockets say, as far as ground beef, then we can't do it. And I think that's something that the Tennessee fan base just have to just wake up and say that, hey, it's going to be a while. But they expect that microwave that, hey, after 2 years, we should be competing for a national championship. Not even an SEC championship, but a national championship.
Jason Witten, now that's an out-of-the-box hire. He's a smart guy. He's obviously a Tennessee guy. He's good with the media. He understands football, of course, but he's not run anything. He's not been a coach. Here's a guy who stepped off the field, went right into the broadcast booth, and stepped back out onto the field for another year or two. And now he's ready to, then he retired again. So interesting.
Well, as always, joy to speak with you, Mark. Hey, you take care of yourself, and hey, please continue doing what you're doing.
Appreciate that, Kevin. Have a good day.
Thanks, same to you.
Michael Hogue on the line. Good to see you. All right. Big Vol Daddy, BVD. We will take these calls, and hopefully he will jump on the line. Will give us some insight into Tennessee football. Because the one thing that I got to admit I don't do well is something like this happens. Okay, Pruitt gets fired. I actually made note of this and talked about this just the other night when we talked about off-season topics. And I said, I need to keep a running list of head coaching candidates for major schools, whether they're just general like Matt Campbell or they are specific to a job like a Tennessee, like T. Martin, like Jason Witten, like Gerard Mayo. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, what's up, Mark? This is BBD. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing well. What's going on, man?
Well, I don't know. Coaching search going on down here.
That's
I don't know
right.
What's going on in your neck of the woods?
You've been through this a few times
here, Mark.
Yes. Let's hear about it.
Yes. This would be coaching search number 5 in the last 11, 12 years. And the previous caller, he mentioned something about Tennessee trying to get away from looking at former Tennessee guys or guys with Tennessee ties as the next head coach. All right. Lane Kiffin, no Tennessee ties. Derek Dooley, no Tennessee ties. Butch Jones, no college football common sense or Tennessee ties. And Jeremy Pruitt, of course, he's a gump. So, good try, Jeremy. Good luck down the road. I just, where we go from here, who knows? But also to the previous caller, Jason Witten, really?
Well, yeah, you're bringing in a guy who's Well, he's going to be a figurehead. He's going to be a guy that people are going to like to see around campus and see on the sidelines. And he knows football. But in terms of running the program and the coaching aspect of it, wow.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that. I'm not going to say that would be completely out of the wheelhouse of a Jason Witten, but come on, that's crazy. And listen, Tennessee fans, Peyton Manning is not coming home to coach the Vols, so don't even start that crap. John Gruden's not leaving the Raiders to come to coach Tennessee, so don't even start with that crap. I was never a big Jeff Fisher fan, but I would be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who are you going to hire that's got more knowledge and ability than that guy?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Jeff Fisher's a strong guy. You need somebody who's a strong, decisive guy, and he's a firm guy. He's got a backbone too, as well.
That's a fact.
Yeah, Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning's living a charmed life. He doesn't need to mess around with recruiting violations and making sure 105 kids are keeping their noses clean. Yeah, he's got a much better life than dealing with all that.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that he said over and over and over again that he has no interest in coaching, and especially dealing with the recruiting aspect of the whole thing. So I know it's a big fantasy of a lot of Tennessee fans to see him on the sidelines as head coach, and hell, he'd probably do a good job, but it's just not happening. The guy I'm looking at right now, honestly, don't look past Kevin Steele. He's the interim guy, and he was hot on our list this last time around and couldn't get him. So, Tennessee fans, I wouldn't look past that. Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, nothing at this point would surprise me.
Hopefully they don't feel the pressure to have like this splash hire, that if they know Kevin Steele's solid, he's going to clean things up. He's going to talk to people, bluntly. He's going to be strong. He's going to kick kids off the team that don't belong, that don't buy in, that won't work. He's going to do all the right things, but it's not this splash hire. Hopefully they still have enough fortitude just to say, we're going to hire the right guy, and it doesn't need to grab headlines and wow people.
Well, at this rate, they're not going to have many people to have to worry about cleaning up at the rate all these kids are jumping off the ship. I forget what the total is, but I think last week there were 17 kids, I think, already that have hit the portal. So getting rid of the ones that don't want to be here is certainly not going to be a problem. I know you're not a Tennessee fan, but if it were your call, first of all, we got to get an AD. I've heard several names in that department, but if it was Mark Rogers' call, who would you like to see down here?
I'd go up to Iowa State and get Matt Campbell. He's a tremendous coach. I don't know if he would leave, but of course, Tennessee's a much better job than Iowa State overall. But in this particular condition, I don't know if that I think he's in a position where he's so highly sought after that he can pick and choose his jobs. And maybe he would think, Tennessee's a great place and a great job, and it's a huge SEC job, but I don't want to mess around with recruiting violations and go somewhere where I'm going to be down X number of scholarships and not be able to go to postseason play for a year or two or whatever it turns out to be. So he may not take the job. And I think Jamie Chadwell out of Coastal Carolina is a tremendous hire. That guy is a ball of fire.
Yeah, he's certainly proven his worth here the last few years. There's another name, Napier, I believe, is a name that's popped up a lot around here. I don't know what I think about that name. I just want somebody that's got head coaching experience, that is a disciplinarian, somebody that's offensive minded, and someone that at least understands the SEC.
Mm.
And that sounds like a simple prerequisite, but a lot of people don't truly get what it takes to coach in this league.
Yeah. Yeah. Auburn.
I think Butch Jones was a good example of that.
Uh-huh. Butch Jones. Yeah, that's an interesting case because that guy always sounded to me like he was, just came off a used car lot. Like he was always trying to sell everybody a car. And it was like, can you just talk plain? But at the same time, he recruited well.
Yeah, getting them here is getting the kids here is the easy part, per se.
Yeah.
Coaching them up, that seems to be the part we're having problems with here. To me, it should never be hard to recruit at Tennessee. Now, granted, we'll probably never recruit like Fulmer did, where we could go into any state and pluck anybody we wanted. That's just not happening anymore, and never will, as long as you got Saban out there and Georgia recruiting like they do. But you can still, Tennessee should be able to get at least a top 15 class every year, and certainly a top 10 class.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Mark, I'll hop off of here and let somebody else call in. I just wanted to call in and weigh in. I've never called in here before, so I thought I'd weigh in a little bit and see what's going on up in the voice of college football's world.
Well, we appreciate your perspective, BVD. So call anytime.
Yes, sir. You have a good evening, buddy.
You too. Our guy BVD talked to a few times, but calling in the show. And as soon as I saw that he was trying to call in, and certainly he's got tons of insight into what's going on there at Tennessee. So I'd like to hear from him as well. I saw some interesting comments coming in I wanted to address, but we'll get to this call. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Dominic. How you doing?
Dominic, you got some insight to give us on the Tennessee job.
Do I have any insight to give on the Tennessee job?
Yes, we're doing a live stream on Jeremy Pruitt was fired at Tennessee today. That's what we're talking about.
Oh, wow. He got fired? Wow, I cannot believe that.
It's incredible, isn't it? Just completely came out of nowhere. He was that close to winning a national championship, and he somehow got fired.
Yeah, that definitely, and I agree with you, that definitely came out of nowhere. I mean, they were close to winning the national championship last season. Or wait, I don't think it was last season. Was it?
They weren't real close last season. So, Dominic, anything else? Is there a reason that you're calling? What do you got for us?
Well, I heard that Tennessee might make 2 or 3 trades for some of their players.
They made some trades? Maybe we should add that to the transfer portal. They're making trades now.
Yeah, we might add that to the transfer portal.
Okay. Thanks, Dominic. Appreciate it.
All right.
Whew. I'm just too kind. I'm too kind. Too kind. All right. Active brain waves are required to call in. All right. 860-325-3687. 860-325-3687. All right. Yes, Jeremy Pruitt got fired. He was not close to winning a national championship. The man went 3-7. We know that. You all know that. Think about this. The roller coaster ride that Jeremy Pruitt and Tennessee football has been on just over the last 2 years. So they come off the 2018 season, which was unsuccessful, of course, but he was starting to build something, and they beat Auburn in 2018. 2018, yes, 2018, they get a win over Auburn late in the season, which showed much improvement. And I believe, if I'm correct, that Kentucky team that finished in the top 10 that season went 10-3, also lost to Tennessee. So they beat Kentucky and Auburn late in the 2018 season. Two really good teams. He has a great recruiting run in 2018 going into 19, the 19 recruiting class. They get off to that awful start in which they have that debacle of a contest at home against Georgia State, a 2-10 group of 5 team. They lose to them. And it wasn't even though they lost on a Hail Mary or a blocked kick. They lost. It only was one score at the end of the game, but they were down by 2 scores. Like it was a loss with 10 minutes left in the game. So anyway, they turn around and they have another debacle of a game against BYU in which they had the game sewn up. They blew a coverage. They blew the game. They lost it. They're 0-2. And they've played 2 of the easiest teams on the schedule. They're 0-2 at that point. They turn it around. They finish 8-5, win a bowl game. They have another great recruiting class. They come into this season. They win their first 2 games. Who'd they beat? Arkansas and Missouri, correct? Yes. So Arkansas at least turned out to be a decent team. Did they beat Arkansas? Was that their? No, not Arkansas. I'm sorry. They beat Missouri. They blasted Missouri, beat them easily, like 35-12. And they beat, I'll get it, South Carolina. South Carolina was their opening night win on the road against South Carolina. Won that game, beat South Carolina, and then beat Missouri easily. And then they were leading Georgia at halftime. Now, there might have been some smoke and mirrors involved there. Georgia basically gave them a touchdown on a botched snap. Still, they were leading Georgia at halftime 21-17. So they're 2-0. Coming off 8-5, 6 consecutive wins, bowl win, recruiting class, stellar, 2-0, leading Georgia on the road at halftime by 21-17 score. Ever since then, off the cliff. Sorry, my whistle's not good today. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. I'm not a consistent whistler, but it's not always awful. Sometimes I can give you a good whistle, but I just couldn't deliver there. Anyway, off the rails the rest of the season. Again, can you really even count a win against Vanderbilt? 3-7. So, wow. The ride for Tennessee football fans in the last year and a half. Jeff Fisher. How about that? Jeff Fisher. Yeah, I would hire Jeff Fisher. Always thought Jeff Fisher was a good coach. Now, his time with the Rams was not successful. All right, folks, we've got a strong 162 on the line. Appreciate you jumping on board as we typically do. And our aim is that anytime there's breaking news, important news, Mark D'Antonio gets fired, Mark Richt leaves Miami, Willie Taggart gone at Florida State. We did this with Will Muschamp and Tom Herman, and now Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee. A big coaching change in college football. We're going to go live immediately. Eric Bieniemy. There's a name for you. There are tons and tons of conversations and reports and that surround Eric Bieniemy's name that say nothing but this guy is a first-rate coach at the NFL level. John Sarian brings up a good point, of course, because we know that Jeff Fisher has only been a player with the Chicago Bears. Of course, USC standout, rumored many times for the USC job because, of course, it's his alma mater. I think the main connection there, I would think, with Tennessee, and the reason Jeff Fisher comes out is that he was highly successful at the NFL level with Tennessee. and then finished up his career with the St. Louis Rams. Yeah, Jeff Fisher's never sat. As far as I know, I'd have to go through his entire coaching career prior to his head coaching stint with the Titans. I believe he was always in the NFL. So has he had to sit in a living room, talk to parents, woo the parents? I don't believe so. But when was the last time that Herm Edwards did that? And he's done a hell of a job at Arizona State recruiting. So there are exceptions. I think that's a valid concern, John. Valid concern. You take that into consideration, but sometimes you just have unique individuals who are capable of adjusting to the scenario and are just good persons. And Herm Edwards is obviously that. Is Jeff Fisher that? I think he's got some of that in him in a different way than Herm Edwards, certainly. Deloach approach, wondering if Cade Mays is regretting stabbing Georgia in the back by saying they have a toxic environment, regardless of the fact it was likely his lawyer telling him to do so. If you want to read an interesting scenario, go online and Google Cade Mays and that situation. Okay, the Rod Farva, thank you for confirming that Jeff Fisher has never coached in college. I didn't know if maybe he had a stint somewhere briefly before he went to the Titans as head coach, but I thought he had paid his dues in the NFL. This is where I would love to see the case scenario. Would love to see a case study where we could just move coaches and see how they would do. Take Nick Saban, say, Nick, next assignment, go to Tennessee, coach. What do you think Tennessee would do this season? I'm going to say that Tennessee would go. If Nick Saban today drove to Knoxville, took over the program, was announced as head coach, so he couldn't do much about the 2021 recruiting class. He could probably add a few players. The transfer portal might go crazy. I think Nick Saban goes 9-3. He goes 9-3 with Tennessee next year. I think he's that good. I think a capable coach can go 6-6 with them. A really good coach. Legend has it that Jeff Fisher ruined Vince Carter's career. Talking about the Carter that played at Florida, that played defensive end for him. Not Vince Carter. What was his first name? That played for, he played for Steve Spurrier at Florida. Then he played for Jeff Fisher, defensive end. Shoot, can't think of his first name. Oh, Vince Young. Okay, Vince Young. Kevin Carter. I was thinking about Kevin Carter playing defensive end at Florida, then at Tennessee for the Titans. Yes. Yes. Trent, I went the Kevin Carter route as well. I think he's talking about Vince Young. Oh, man. And he ruined Sean Merriman's career, too. No, I think Sean Merriman ruined his own career. Sean Merriman was responsible for Sean Merriman ruining his own career. You know, Tom Herman went through my mind as well. He really did. I don't think I would go that route because he needs to separate himself from this word's a little strong, but failure at Texas. For me to hire him at a top job like Tennessee, he needs to show that, okay, he went to a group of 5 and he went to Memphis or went somewhere like that. And then he won for 3 more years. And okay, he's ready to give it another go at this level. All right. All good stuff from all of you. Thank you so much for joining the live chat. And again, anytime there's breaking news, we're going to be here as soon as possible to break it down. And head coach firings in college football are basically the biggest news you can get. They are the kings of campus. They are the kings of the state. They own the state. They are the highest paid public employees in the state. They own the state. This is what college football is all about. The head coach is the star. He's the guy. And so we've had a number relieved of their duties this year. Will Muschamp at South Carolina, Derek Mason at Vanderbilt. Two of the most notable ones off the top of my head, and others, of course, Tom Herman at Texas. And now Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee with the dreaded double whammy. Losing 3-7, 16-19 in the SEC, 10-16 in conference play, and NCAA violations that look to be certain. They will be certain because even the University of Tennessee has issued statements to say we are going to experience level 1 and or level 2 violations. All right, who will be the next coach at Tennessee? We have certainly determined a number of names that could be possible, and we shall see in the next few days. We will see first, as BVD pointed out, and we talked about even before we took his call, Phillip Fulmer is stepping down as athletic director, so the university has to hire an athletic director first, then a head coach. So most likely that head coach is not going to come from current coaching ranks within college football, because it's going to take them a couple of weeks to hire an AD. And then it's going to take that AD at least a couple of weeks to hire a head coach, I would think. So we're going to be here in about 3 to 4 weeks, and Tennessee's going to announce its next head coach. I don't think he's going to come from college football unless he was recently released again from another program, i.e. Tom Herman. All right, we will continue to follow the Tennessee situation, and we'll keep in mind that in recent hours, we have talked Penn State, UCLA, also Minnesota, and we've also talked Clemson. So those videos are going to be released very soon. Clemson, Minnesota, Penn State, and UCLA, and others are coming on the way here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Hit that bell for the notifications once you have subscribed. That way you know when we're going live. Take care. We'll see you soon.